Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mafia and Gangsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue the wonderful book Super Mafia, Organized Crime Threatens America by Jonathan Harris. Once again going into chapter 3, this one involving part 3 with a theme once again associated with the tidal wave of drugs. This will wrap up this chapter here. And then we'll go on to the next chapter in the next part. This one follows the theme associated with drugs in sports. We were just talking about the high proliferation associated with drugs within various sport fields. So let's see at least what the rest of this chapter entails about that. It'll be interesting to see how it plays for today's time period. This book was again written sometime in the early 1980s, so pretty much it's coming up on 40 years when it comes to its existence. But again, there's a lot of relevance still associated with it. So without further ado, this will be part 3, and here's what it says. The problem is by no means limited to football. Baseball, basketball, and hockey stars have been hooked as well. Even a top tennis star like Vitas Gerulaitis has been mentioned in a trial involving a cocaine deal, although a subsequent grand jury investigation cleared him. The possibilities became reality in the case of Rick Kunn of the Boston College basketball team. Kunn was convicted in November 1981, along with 3 men reportedly linked to mafia families in New York and Pittsburgh for conspiring to fix 6 games during the 1978-1979 season. The convictions were based mainly on the testimony of accused drug dealer Henry Hill, who turned government informant in exchange for lenient treatment. Hill said that Kunn had received $2,500 per game plus cocaine and Quaaludes. The team co-captain, Jim Sweeney, testified that Kunn had offered him money to participate in the point-shaving scheme. The gambler's profit was somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000. Kunn's sentence was 10 years in prison. The cocaine problem is especially sensitive because the drug is so expensive. At a hearing in Philadelphia, Eagles fullback Leroy Harris admitted that much of his $60,000 bonus had gone for coke. Tim Raines, left fielder for the Montreal Expos, told the Montreal Gazette he used an amount of cocaine worth more than $40,000 in 9 months. George Rogers, the New Orleans Saints' brilliant rookie halfback, confessed to a grand jury that he spent more than $10,000 on coke during his first pro season. The cost was about the same for Los Angeles pitcher Steve Howe. In November 1983, 3 members of the Kansas City Royals, including American League batting champion Willie Wilson, were sentenced to prison terms of 3 months each for attempting to buy cocaine. Baseball Commissioner Bowie Kunn then suspended them, along with Steve Howe, for a full year. But for amounts like those needed to sustain a coke habit, it is almost inevitable that some athlete will sooner or later be driven too deep into debt to climb out without help. In the words of NFL Security Deputy Charles Jackson, it has caused an economic blowout for some players. We have seen high-paid players continually broke, asking to renegotiate their contracts, or begging for an advance on their salary checks. For sports superstars in that kind of trouble, Mafia loan sharks stand ready at a moment's notice to extend credit for unlimited drug supplies. All that would be asked in return is a little point shaving here and there, a well-timed error, and then just enough manipulation of game scores to ensure that the big bets pay off. Sports security officials and the drug enforcement authorities are now scrutinizing players' off-the-field conduct and their connections more closely than ever. But with so many top jocks suddenly revealed to be so vulnerable to temptation, the prospects for finding that none has succumbed are chancy. And then the next segment is new law enforcement strategies. Whether in sports or on the street, the government's war against the drug traffickers has so far fallen considerably short of total success. Federal funds for this effort have tripled in recent years. They currently add up to about $1 billion a year. The good news is that there has been a marked increase in drug seizures, especially of heroin and cocaine. The bad news is that the amount seized has amounted to only 10 to 13% of the incoming supply. New York Special Narcotics Prosecutor Sterling Sterling Johnson told New York Magazine that only between 5 and 10% of those currently dealing in drugs on a regular basis ever come close to getting caught. There's a feeling all around town today that to get caught dealing drugs, you've either got to be very, very dumb or very, very unlucky. In the words of a 1983 report by the watchdog agency of the federal government, the General Accounting Office, it says, current federal resources have been inadequate to stop or even substantially impair drug smuggling. Just to intercept as much as 75% of the marijuana entering the United States from the Caribbean would require $2 billion or more. Meanwhile, the costs to society keep mounting at a fearsome rate. In the early 1980s, Temple University carried out a study of the link between heroin addiction and crime in the Baltimore area. The result was startling. A mere 243 junkies had committed more than 500,000 crimes since 1970. The expense of dealing with drug-related crime for the nation's criminal justice system is currently placed at over $11 billion a year. Clearly, new approaches are needed. One response was a big new federal campaign announced by President Reagan. 12 regional task forces were set up. Each has full power to coordinate all federal anti-drug activities in its area. For the first time, the operations of the FBI, Drug Enforcement Administration, U.S. Customs, Coast Guard, Organized Crime and Racketeering Section of the Department of Justice, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and Internal Revenue Service, and numerous other federal agencies have come under unified direction. Surprisingly, the FBI had scarcely participated in narcotics investigations prior to this new offensive. As of January 1982, it had fewer than 100 significant drug investigations underway. But in that month, it was ordered to bring its powerful resources fully to bear on the problem and to work in close coordination with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Within 2 years, the FBI's drug cases had multiplied nearly 12 times to a total of over 1,100 cases. Unlike previous anti-drug problems or programs, this one is focusing on top-level distribution networks rather than on the street sales and local dealers. Between $130 and $200 million has been allotted to it. Another new tactic currently being tested is a hunt for secret foreign bank accounts fattened with drug profits. We want to follow the money out of the country to see where it's being laundered and by whom. Francis J. Story, director of the FBI's Organized Crime Division in New York City, declared recently. A U.S. Senate subcommittee has estimated that some $80 billion a year is being laundered through secret bank accounts overseas. Not all of this is drug money, but according to a June 1983 study in USA Today, these accounts are a favorite cash stash for tax evaders and drug kingpins. The new anti-drug push unquestionably offers real promise, but optimism about eliminating America's drug problem will be premature. The domestic demand for illegal narcotics keeps rising. The supply from abroad keeps flooding through all the law enforcement barriers, and the Mafia keeps demonstrating awesome capabilities for maintaining and even expanding its mastery of the drug situation. So that's it. That pretty much wraps up part 3 of chapter 3 associated with this chapter, again being called a tidal wave of drugs. Let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. It was interesting to see how once again the world of Henry Hill and Goodfellas was brought into the forefront. Because yes, indeed, I remember reading that both in the original book, Wise Guys, and of course, it was kind of detailed in the movie. I wish the movie would have shown more regards to this, the movie Goodfellas, with regards to that scenario, that instance of where Paul Vadio's crew was involved with that point shaving game, that system. That was involving those 6 games around the 78-79 season, and how they were able to influence something associated with the college basketball teams that were there. And so that point shaving allowed them to, as the book highlighted, can pretty much profit about $75,000 to $100,000. Isn't that crazy? I mean, that's something where you would think it wouldn't have much impact, but it does. Because all of a sudden, imagine if somebody is on that team and they're involved with the mafia in this case in terms of purposely missing shots or making sure that certain games are won by certain points, that could impact the rest of the season. The rest of the players there, everyone there, the team as well, the school, everyone could be severely impacted, almost like a butterfly effect, and all because somebody wanted to just profit with just a little bit of money, but then that made the mafia even more money there. And then, of course, it highlighted some of the other areas, some of the other pro sports members out there and how much money they spent. Ridiculous money. Just goes to show where if you're giving somebody fast cash and they're in a field world involving just highly dramatized scenarios, lots of women, lots of drugs, lots of parties, you better believe they're going to spend a lot of money associated with it and then go broke afterward. It's crazy stuff. But it was a little disheartening to see how much money is being spent associated with the war on drugs. And again, this is from 1984. Billions and billions of dollars. I can only imagine what the cost is now associated with it. And there was the mafia pretty much behind it along the way, as the title indicated towards the end, making sure that they can master this drug situation. Crazy stuff. And the next chapter is going to be called Chapter 4, and it's called Odds on the Mafia. It looks like it continues more along the lines of sports betting or sports manipulation. Interesting stuff. I'm wondering if they're going to bring in the movie Casino as with regards to the characters there. Let's see how that happens as well. If it does, I'll be really excited. All right, everyone. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.